Hi everyone, welcome to the channel, and today we're going to talk about Meet the Beatles. This is the 60th anniversary Target Opaque Blue edition, and we're going to go over it and compare this album to an original January 1964 edition, which I've had in possession since 1994 when my parents gave it to me, which does not have the credits, by the way. I'm going to give you sound comparisons, so we're going to really have some fun with this video today. So immediately thinking about Meet the Beatles, it was one of the first records I ever heard growing up in the 90s. My first copy that I had was that my father gifted to me when I was about 10 or 11 years old. I love this record. I mean, I've heard it on everything. I have the cassette. I've got the 2004 Capitol Albums edition, which uses the same tape that this version uses. I've owned the 2014 US Albums box set, which really pulls from the 2009 Mono Masters. Right off the bat, I'm very aware of the history behind Dave Dexter Jr.'s sort of manipulation of these recordings. And one thing that to be said about the mono editions is while he did do a fair share of manipulation, he's added some EQs, he's done some fold down mixes with his team. If you actually look at the liner notes of this, they tell you which recordings use the original mono mixes and which ones are fold downs. I Want to Hold Your Hand and This Boy are true mono mixes, but everything else on here has been folded down from the stereo masters from the UK. And while we can argue that this is several generations away from the original session recordings that were done at Abbey Road, the mastering done here is superb. And it clearly shows, regardless of how many masters, how many generations we've gone through to get to here, the tape, the innovations from the 60s, and the engineers involved in the various chains of getting to this release from the original in the UK, you could tell the incredible work that was done by those engineers, because this sounds incredible. It really does. Okay, what I want to do now is compare covers. What I have here is my original January 1964 release. So I want to compare that along with my 2024 edition, which I just picked up last night at Target. And I gotta say, I've owned Meet the Beatles since 1994. And to see it on a store shelf, we've had a lot of releases since then. Obviously, the 2012 stereo editions on vinyl, and then the 2014 editions on vinyl as part of those box sets, all of which I've owned and have bought in stores. But I've never seen one of the US releases in a US store in my lifetime. So last night was pretty special to see this on a shelf. Kind of became one of those little YouTube bloggers, where I'm taking video of myself in the store. I've never really done that before, but that was kind of fun, and I get why people are doing that. So there's so much I can say about this release, and we're going to. Right away, I can see that the new 2024 edition is kind of a photocopy. You could see a little bit more grain. It's a little darker. It's also tinted a little bluer to really emphasize the color differences of the two. And if you compare this to With the Beatles definitely has a more gray tone to it. I also see Meet the Beatles is slightly darker, a little bluer. The browns are very similar, but the brown is a little bit darker on the new edition versus the January 1964 release. Now, what's really interesting is the back covers. The original has a very blown out image of the Beatles standing in the corner, whereas the new one very well could have been using an original negative. You see much more detail in their faces. The shadowing of the floor of where they're standing is more visible, where this is a little bit more blown out. That could have been done intentionally to sort of remove the sort of gray flooring and to kind of give the idea that they're standing behind a complete white background. Either way, I love this image, and I love how detailed we get to see it here. I also kind of like that if you really focus on it, there's like a hint of almost deliberate fading. My original release has a little bit of a brown tan to it on the background in the whites, And this one kind of has that too. And, the paper itself, the printing isn't exactly white. It's almost got like a little bit of a beige hint to it that kind of reflects the original. And I think that's kind of fun. I like that. Okay, the next thing I want to do is compare the original inner sleeves. So the original inner sleeve, obviously the original has a little bit more even kind of spacing, where the new one takes that image and kind of crops it down a little bit. I mean, it's just great to see that they've included this. So anybody who's picking this up can get an idea of what the original inner sleeve looked like. And I'll tell you, it's fun to look at these images again. I mean, seeing pictures of Beach Boy albums, Nat King Cole, Jackie Gleason, Peggy Lee, albums that were released during the day. Here's a couple of the Lettermen. Another great vocal group you guys should check out. If you haven't heard of the Lettermen, especially those early records, they're pretty phenomenal. They're still touring, by the way, so you should check out those guys. All right, also included, which is really, really fun, is the reprint of the tape box. And this really, when you look at this, you can kind of get an idea of the mixing notes, the EQ notes that were used in the original. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can see how they're reducing a lot of the bass notes. They've actually boosted some of the treble for that release. And what we're seeing here makes a lot of sense. It's great to see that they've actually digitally archived this at 32-bit 192 kilohertz. I'm glad that sticker exists for this, because it's nice to know that they've done that and that we can get a future high-resolution potential download of this, because it's really wonderful. There's a lot of great liner notes here by Bruce Spicer. And if you don't know Bruce's work, you really should check out his website, which I'll link in the video. But he's done some really great liner notes. He's covered a lot, and from my understanding, he's been heavily involved in this release, not only for this record of the Meet the Beatles, but all the other 1964 mono releases that have been now made available to us. I love the mastering notes here, and if you guys have seen that video that was released a couple weeks ago, really goes into the details of what it took to create this new release, and the efforts are really showing. I'm really impressed by everything that I'm seeing here. Okay, now we're going to get into the real fun, and we're going to compare the original release to the brand new 60th anniversary opaque blue edition that I have. And this new disc is really awesome. Look at the beautiful color of blue that we're getting with this. I really love how they strive to match the original. Again, no BM ASCAP credits on the original release. I love that they're kind of reproducing that here, and they do it pretty darn faithfully. This release, I would say, is very comparable to the 2012 and 2014 stereo and mono vinyl releases, where they really preserved all of the details of the original releases of each of those UK releases, going with the gold Parlophone label for Please Please Me on both the stereo and the mono editions, which was true. I mean, those original editions had the gold label on them before they switched over to the traditional yellow and black a couple months later. What I'm also noticing is they've used more of the disc on this release compared to the original. The lead-out grooves on the original is much wider, meaning that the grooves themselves are much more squished. Same material here, but this has got more. It's like they've given more space on the discs to breathe, and that's a really great thing to see. Okay, now I want to get into the nitty-gritty of this. What I want to do is a sound comparison of 3 variants of the tape that was used for this release. We're going to compare this brand new 2024 to my original January 1964 release, as well as the CD release from 2004, which utilizes the same tape. All three of these are using the same tape. Obviously, the CD is a little bit of a different comparison, but I want to use it for reference sake. Now, we could go in even further and compare the 2009 release, a mono box set release. We could compare that EP collection that is very highly regarded amongst us Beatles fans. But I want to keep it simple. I want to use the same source material and just give you guys an idea of the sound quality differences. Now for this test, what I've done is I've digitized the two records, the 1964 and the 2024 editions, on my U-turn turntable, which uses a Grado needle. And I've captured this at 2496 kilohertz directly into a 2007 MacBook. There's no additional device that's been used for this. I've tried to reduce my chain so I'm not utilizing or introducing anything new into the chain. Also, as a side note, what I also did here is to adjust the volumes of each one of these so that they are comparable volume-wise. I'm not trying to enhance them or add any kind of compression or limiting. I just want to sort of balance them out a little bit so that they sound sort of normal volume-wise between the three of them. So here we go. Right away I can tell, even with my volume leveling on my software, that the original 1964 release is much quieter. Even though this was mastered pretty hot back then, it's much quieter compared to the other releases. This 1964 release definitely loses a lot of its bass, low end, and even some of its treble. Even you can see in those liner notes that they've added some treble from the original tape, but it's just not there. It's a lot noisier. Obviously, being quieter in its volume, you're going to hear a little bit more surface noise. And again, it's a 60-year-old record. There's going to be more scratches involved and so forth. As good as my parents kept this, they played it quite a bit. And I did too, of course. Listening to the brand new release, I'm immediately struck by the incredible use of bass and treble that is present on this release. It's incredible how the mastering was done on this to achieve both the bass and treble tones while also addressing the sibilance and the essing issues that are often attributed to these types of records in general. Incredibly done. I just cannot get over how good this new record sounds. Now, the Capitol album's mono variant that uses the same tape that the 64 and the 2024 releases use is really good. These have over the years have gotten considerable praise from where they had set in collectors' minds, a couple of years ago. I've got to say, I really like these, but they were mastered a little hot, and I did notice that that there was some limiting applied to this. So there is something to be said about that. But as far as CD editions of this release go, I would pick up this box set over the 2014 US albums releases. Simply, if you're looking to get a digital version of this release in its truest sense of what was released, I would pick up this release. Having heard all three of these variants, I really have to say that I'm really impressed by the mastering of this. It's super clean, has great bottom end, great high end, really comparable to what was done digitally here without the compression and limiting that was done on this set. This record really allows these recordings to breathe, and they just sound fantastic. But that said, for a digital release, this sounds really good, and I highly recommend it. But if you're looking for the best this tape is going to sound, you want to pick this one up. It really is fantastic. Whether you get the opaque blue edition or the standard black edition, I think you're going to be really surprised. Alright, thanks everybody for sticking through to the end of this video. If you have any additional thoughts or suggestions for future videos or anything that I've discussed here, definitely drop me a comment in the comment sections. I will certainly read them and respond to you. What would you like to see differently? Would you like to have seen a stereo edition of this album? For me, I would love to see that. I think one thing that would need to be addressed to really make it truly special, I would love to see I Want to Hold Your Hand and This Boy in true stereo with the rest of the album, which already is in true stereo. Personally, I would love to see Apple and Universal do a sort of hybrid. Maybe strike a brand new stereo tape with all the stereo mixes, but utilizing the UK masters for that and creating a really definitive stereo edition of this release. That's sacrilegious and kind of talking 2014 US monos territory, moving away from preservation. But I'll tell you, I love this album in stereo, but the EQ, the rechanneled stereo stuff for I Want to Hold Your Hand and This Boy is a little jarring. The rest of the album sounds fantastic. It would be interesting. There's a lot more to discuss about not only this album, but the many, many other releases that exist. And I'll be doing that in the upcoming months. So if you like what I'm doing here, check back every once in a while. Till then, bye for now.